We're good.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good evening, rather. Feels like morning. And welcome to the June 2nd Township Committee meeting. We will now salute the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start our meeting this evening, we just want to take a few minutes to recognize some of the events that have occurred in our community and throughout our country. First, I'd like to start off by explaining why you see all my colleagues today wearing orange. We're wearing orange because we're all against gun violence. We want to see gun violence end. This Friday, June 5th, is National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and you're supposed to wear orange to stand up against the gun violence that's happened to so many people in our communities. It started when a young African-American female who had just finished performing in Barack Obama's inauguration was tragically shot down on the west side of Chicago as an innocent bystander. And her friends got together and said, if hunters can wear orange when they go out to hunt in the woods to protect themselves, then we should wear orange ourselves to protect ourselves. And that movement, which started back in 2013, has gone all over the world. And even in these times, we want to recognize all the effort and work of Moms Demand Action and all the other organizations that are associated with ending gun violence. And thank you for your work. All of us support you and we salute you. The other thing that we want to take a few minutes to discuss and reflect on is the tragic loss of the American George Floyd. Without even getting into the depth of this tragic and senseless loss, I would like to do is offer my colleagues an opportunity to, express themselves as they see fit about how they're feeling right now, so that you, as the public, know what's going on in their minds and their hearts. So without further ado, I'll open it up to any of my colleagues to start.
Mayor, I'm happy to go first. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for your leadership in the past few days. I know this has been very hard on you and very personal to you, and we stand with you. I hope you know that. I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to say it all because ultimately words are cheap. I want to express my sincere sympathies and condolences to the Floyd family and to all the African American and people of color families across the nation who have lost their Black son or Black daughter to police aggression and violence this week that we have maybe not seen on a video or in social media. We stand in solidarity, or I stand in solidarity with our fellow protesters calling for justice, because truly without justice, there will be no peace here. And I don't see our country finding peace without real justice this time around. But I will let my actions as an elected official speak louder than my words. I will follow you, Mayor, and other Black leaders here locally. And I will also engage the community and other advocates myself, calling to action against systemic racism, calling to action against the system that shelters bad cops, that squeezes the life and every breath out of any transparency or accountability. We must do better. We will do better. We must lift each other up out of fear and out of violence and out of hatred. I believe that together we can give birth to a new nation, not the nation that we currently live in, a nation built on slavery, on bondage, criminalization, and marginalization against people of color. And obviously not lost on me here, Mayor, that today we're also proclaiming Pride Month. June is Pride Month. And of course, when we talk about violence against people of color, we know the data shows clearly that in our country still today, even after all of our civil rights battles and all of our gains and all of our losses, America still is a violent nation against LGBTQ persons of color. Predominantly, we must work together to call to action against that. So I believe tonight, later, Mayor, you will be announcing some local opportunities and calls to action. I don't want to steal your thunder just yet on those, but I do believe that this change, this transformation begins here at home at the local level, educating folks about the current system and where reforms need to be made. And together we shall march all the way to the capital of our country to transform our nation. Those are my remarks, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Thank you very much. That was heartfelt and greatly appreciated personally, and I'm sure by everyone as well.
So, Mayor, I was going to save this till later, but I too want to express my sincere sympathies and for everything that's been going on. But frankly, I'm at a loss. I really am. I feel completely powerless to help change the situation in America regarding racism and racial inequities. I have done all the social media stuff by changing my profile picture to Black for Blackout Tuesday. I've promoted Black Lives Matter because they do. I have argued with Facebook friends about their points of view. I've marched and protested and attended candlelight vigils. I've raised 5 children to judge people by the content of their character and not by their color of their skin, and they do. I've talked to relatives and neighbors or ex-neighbors who don't understand why some of the things they say are racist, but they can't for the life of them understand because they honestly and earnestly don't think of themselves as racist. I've spoken up in social gatherings and parties when someone says something inappropriate or insensitive or downright wrong. And when I listen to people like Dr. Michael Eric Dyson being asked what we as white people can do, and the answers they give are things I feel like I'm already doing. And so I feel helpless and at a loss as to how I can help. And maybe others feel this way. Maybe I feel so helpless because I live in a community where the overwhelming majority of people feel as I do. So to whom do I say the things Dr. Dyson and others tell me to say to other white people to help this? Maybe I feel helpless because the people I hang out with all feel the same as I do. So there's no one in my friend group that I can educate either. You know, I was thinking about this for the last several days, and we live in a wonderful glass bubble that's not without its scratches and cracks. But it's about as good as it gets. For that, I'm really grateful. But I continue to look for guidance as to how I can help in this awful place we find ourselves in right now. And in a mere few months, we have experienced a pandemic leading to economic catastrophe and crisis, and now racist killings and riots we haven't experienced since I was 10 years old. So I say all this is why I feel at a loss, even as a community leader, because of the community I help lead is, already feeling and doing the things that we need people in this country to do. And while I speak out as an elected official and stand in solidarity with protesters and people who Black and brown Americans, I also don't feel like I should even say this much, to take up space that people of color should and could be using to express their sadness, their fear, their frustration, their grief. So I too feel the sadness, fear, frustration, and grief, but I can't pretend that I fully understand how it must feel for a person of color to watch a Black man murdered by a white police officer, or how I could fully understand how it must feel to be a mother of a Black man and watch the same thing. I sure can imagine, but I can't really know. So I guess I just want to say that to the extent that I, as a white woman, can, I feel your pain as Black and brown Americans, and I will do whatever I can to help reduce the scourge in this world. So that's all I have.
Nancy, thank you. Ms. Adams, thank you for your words. It's one thing is you continue to do what you're doing, because to reverse the course, we need to not do that. Even if you're preaching to the choir, this is a good song to preach to them, because one day you'll be preaching and someone will be talking or listening to that choir that's not part of, your circle or the majority of this community. So your actions, what you do every day, to live by what you said, that's the foundation, and we need to keep building on that foundation, so that we can make impacts in our community in every place that we are, the country clubs, the grocery stores, or, every place where there is the potential for that underlining racism, that natural subliminal, racism that occurs on a day-to-day basis. So continue to do what you're doing, continue to, walk in that right path. And for that, I thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank all my colleagues.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just say a few words.
Of course.
Thank you. Like many of you and many who may be watching tonight, I watched with disgust, but not surprise, the murder of George Floyd. And I've watched the fabric of our communities across the country ripping in the aftermath of that event. And it's revealing and opening wounds of race relations in this country that aren't new, but have been bleeding for centuries. I'm striving, like Nancy, to find ways to help, including joining in constructive, meaningful dialogues to unite against racism and find ways to advocate to change the laws and institutions that not only permit but guarantee that racism continue in this country. And tonight, I think all of us are standing in solidarity and affirm that we're a community in Maplewood where racism has no place. And we have an unwavering commitment to a culture of inclusion and equality. But as Deputy Mayor Daff has said, talk is cheap. So, I do want to affirm tonight that, that Black Lives Matter, and that all of us have a responsibility, but I think particularly white leaders of political institutions, of community organizations, have a responsibility to speak out. But I think, the moment of silence that we're going to have tonight is appropriate to honor and remember Mr. Floyd and other victims. But I plan on doing my best, this month and going forward on these issues to have more moments of silence where I listen to voices, particularly Black voices and other voices of people of color. And you know, and not talking is not something that comes easily or naturally to me. But I'm really going to try to listen, and you know, and to do my best to amplify the voices of those people, and not center my own voice. And I do have some ideas for activism and reform that we can pursue here locally, and I'll get into that in my report. You know, but really, I just want to express, you know, my sympathy, and my commitment to be part of the healing, and part of helping our society to evolve in whatever small way I can. And all I can say is I'm very open to ideas about how I can help to do that and move that cause forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mr. Limbrick. Appreciate those words. And I think you said it right. You know, it's not just today, it's going to be tomorrow and the next day and the next day after this. You know, we cannot go back into that finite mindset of, you know, we protest, we riot, we do certain things, you know, on our social media, and then we let it fade out. We have to stop that behavior, and that's important. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say a few things. I was 16 years old in 1967 when John Smith, a Newark cab driver, was beaten by the police. And that sparked nearly a month of rebellion in the city of Newark. A dozen people died, hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage to people's homes and businesses, communities decimated. And then as like now, with the death of George Floyd, it wasn't just that incident. As horrible as the murder was, and it was murder, and those other three cops who just stood by and watched and allowed that to happen are enablers to murder. As horrible as that was, it is just the spark for the underlying anger and tension and frustration that we've all expressed here tonight. And what I learned then, and I was not at all involved, I was just a kid. But what I learned from that and watched that over the last 50 years and saw how people took to the streets and changed policies and changed who represented them and changed the decision makers. I want us to put that in the mix as we protest, as we express our frustrations. We need to keep moving in this long marathon of social justice. We are not going to end this next week. We are not going to be, just like we talk about the pandemic, there's not a switch to turn back the economy. There's not a switch to end what we have as a problem of race relations in this country today. And here in this state of New Jersey, one of the most segregated states, we have a lot to do. And what I would urge us all to do is keep going out into the street, keep voting. And if I might just say something about voting, elections do matter. And we know we have a racist in the White House, but it is not just the president. It is it's a structure, it's a system that has to change. We certainly have to change who's there, because the lack of leadership is just sickening. And in fact, the fueling of the flames is totally, totally antithetical to everything that we should be standing up for as a country and as a society. So I want to express, as a white person with privilege, a sense of sorrow and shame to the people who are being mistreated by our system and by individuals who represent our system. And I think that for too long, we have allowed the police to get away with too much. And we need to bring them into control, under control of the civilians, and hold them accountable. And we need to break down the blue wall. And I'm speaking as a son of a former police officer. But we cannot allow the police to continue to do what they're doing in this country. There are good police, and we need police, and we respect the police, but they need to be brought under control. And I think I would compliment our Attorney General and the governor for some of their efforts, our own police chief as to what they're doing, what he's doing rather, and working with us. But all of these little ingredients have to be put into the mix if we're going to make that change. So if I can influence anyone, I would say keep walking in the street. Keep challenging those of us who are in positions of authority and power. Keep asking those very hard questions. And do it in a peaceful way, but do it. Keep challenging us, keep challenging the system, keep marching, keep asking, keep voting.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. And you're right, 100%. This is something that really is going to be impacted if we decide to do the things that we need to do, and that's vote, and not just for a president, but for the people that are elected officials in Trenton, in DC, in Maplewood, in Newark, at all levels. If we have prosecutors that don't understand the importance of when things happen that are not right by police officers, then we need to get rid of those prosecutors. And whoever appoints them, we need to get rid of them. If we have police officers that don't understand what it means to de-escalate, we need to get rid of them. If we have elected officials who don't understand that we need laws to protect people of color and change the system, we need to get rid of them. I don't care if they've served for 1 minute or 10 years or 100 years. And we need reinforcements. So when the 5 of us go out there and do the things that are brave, and then maybe we, are casualties and don't get to keep as elected officials, that's fine. Someone right behind us keeps the fight going. I challenge all the elected officials at all levels who've been in their positions for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 20 years, to stop turning their back on this crap. Stop appointing people that don't understand what justice really means. Tired of it. And for the people out there, the citizens and residents, start to ask the questions. How does this happen? What's going on? Why can't justice be served? Find out who's making those decisions. Find out what their names are, how they're appointed, or how they're elected, and get them out of office and get them out of their positions. Find out who their names are. Do the work. Work with us. It's going to take time. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to make a difference and really make a change. We have to go after the people that believe that what has happened, indirectly or directly, is right and just, and it's not. There is zero excuse. 3rd-degree murder? No, 1st-degree murder, 100%. That's an insult. The dictation of 3rd-degree and 1st-degree murder, insult. what they charged him with. I first just want to step back and express my condolences to the Floyd family. They've been brave throughout this. They've been in the public. I can't even imagine the gravity of knowing everywhere you go, there's a possibility of seeing someone that you grew up with, you loved, that you took care of, be murdered at the knee of someone who took an oath to serve and protect. Really? It's disgusting. But as all my colleagues have said today, this evening, there's a lot of things that we need to do, and we got to move forward. We got to continue to do what we're doing so that we can be part of the foundation. We have to dedicate our time and energy and resources to making a change, not today, not tomorrow, but every day. We have to vote every election, every position. We have to use that voice as well. And we have to keep getting out in those streets, and we got to keep questioning why. And if we don't understand, we need to voice that anger and voice so someone can help explain it to us why things are the way they are. For the most part, they are that way because we've let them be that way. We've accepted that it's okay, it's justified. Oh, well, he did drugs, or oh, he's a gangbanger, he's a thug. We've accepted that definition and rationale to allow, to accept the taking of another person's life. Unacceptable. So let's take a step back. Well, one more thing before I finish my remarks. This morning, we had a tragic fire in our community, and 3 people are fighting for their lives. Those individuals were having a moment of reflection and memory for Mr. Floyd. And indirectly, that was part of what occurred earlier this morning. It's a ripple effect. This family, this great family that's done great work with our food pantries, took a moment to reflect on the life of Mr. Floyd and lit a candle in his memory. And unfortunately now, they're fighting for their lives. Would never happened if what didn't happen in Minnesota happened. So let's take a moment and silence for Mr. Floyd. Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we've lost another great in our community. And I'm referring to our former mayor, our colleague, our friend, Jerry Ryan. And that we also take a few minutes to reflect on the great life that Jerry had and his amazing contribution to our community. And I like to again offer the opportunity for any of my colleagues, if you feel fit or see fit, to say a few words about Jerry.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say a few words, and I've said a fair bit on social media, and I had a remembrance of Jerry that was published in the Village Green. So I don't want to repeat what I've said elsewhere. other than to, just to express, my gratitude and appreciation, and my real respect for Jerry. Jerry was someone, who was albeit briefly, a political adversary, who, against whom I ran a very difficult campaign. And after it was over, I wouldn't have blamed him a bit, had he been bitter, or disliked me. But if anything, it was the opposite. From even while the election was going on, Jerry was supportive. He was a mentor, and as soon as the election was over, he promised to do whatever he could to help, and he did. Over the years, he was actually one of my closest advisors. He's someone who I would call when I needed to understand an issue. And he's someone who always put the community first. And, what really stood out about Jerry is that he loved people, and he loved our town. And, one thing that, that I really have come to respect about Jerry, particularly when I think about Jerry as a leader in our community, whether he was serving in an elected position or otherwise, is that, while it's easy for people to bring, torches and sledgehammers and to knock other people's ideas down, Jerry is someone who, when it came time to build something, he always brought bricks, and he brought wood, and he brought a hammer, and he tried to pitch in. And I respect the doers. I respect the people who try. And Jerry was someone who always tried, often successfully, to make this community a better place to live. And he's someone who was always volunteering, and always finding a way to serve. And I think that, to the extent that we think of Maplewood, as a community of servants, of people who step up to do their part to make the community better. I think Jerry played a huge role in building that sense of community here in Maplewood, and I think we all owe him a debt of gratitude. His wife Deborah and his kids and his whole family have my deepest sympathy. And Jerry is gone, but certainly won't be forgotten. And obviously tonight will not be the last time that we honor Jerry and honor his memory, and the lasting impact that his life will have on our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Limerick. Would anyone else like to say a few words about Mr. Ryan? Okay, I'll say a few words. I didn't know Jerry very long either, like some of my other colleagues, but Jerry was dedicated to serving this community. I use the term occasionally that, your blood is in the bricks. And I don't use it very often, but for Jerry, that's the truth. Here's a devoted, dedicated person who, regardless of being the mayor or township committee person or the chair of the planning board or just a regular citizen, always found a way to work toward the better good of our community. And if he knew you wanted to get involved, he would put his arm around you and guide you this way or that way. Even in our small amount of time together on the planning board, he was more than gracious. He was proactively reaching out to me and communicating to me the process, making sure I was comfortable, making sure that I knew what was happening, how he likes to run meetings, did I have any input. Very collaborative. willing to adapt to a way that maybe was different from him from years past for the better good of the community. That was Jerry. Meet for a coffee at Village Coffee every once in a while and catch up and talk about certain things. He was just dedicated to this community. I mean, there have been people here for a long time, and there's some people that come and go. But Jerry was a staple. And as we all know, he occasionally comes to our TC meetings just to be there, not with any particular purpose, just to be there, to still be part of the narrative. And, he was a friend to all, And a lot of things that, we talk about in our community, in terms of, some of the inclusivity and the diversity and all these, attributes that we like to boast about, in our community. Jerry did the work. So we can say those things. Jerry did the work. So let us recognize that it's because of Jerry that we can say those things, because he put his blood in those bricks so that our foundation could be strong. Thank you, Jerry. God bless you, Jerry. We'll now have a moment of silence for our former mayor, our former colleague, and always our friend, Jerry Ryan. Thank you.
Frank, you're frozen.
I can't hear the mayor.
Neither of us can. He's frozen. Can we get some technical assistance here, please, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm gonna call him right now. Let him know he dropped.
I see we're putting up high school pictures.
That's adorable. I love it.
Hello?
You're back. We can see you now and hear you, Mayor.
Thank you. I had to switch Wi-Fi. My apologies. I will, I'm not sure where I got cut off. Hopefully after the moment of silence. So I'll just start the meeting. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2020 to the News Record and Star Ledger in December 2019, and by filing said notice in the office of the Township Clerk.
Mr. Adams?
Here. Sorry.
Mr. Daffis?
Here.
Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Lembrick?
Here.
Mayor McGee.
Here.
Whereas Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the governing body has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting. And whereas it's a desire of the governing body to comply with the provision of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner. Now therefore be resolved by the Township Committee, Township Maplewood, does hereby prohibit, except as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in deliberations of the governing body by the public, and except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to the observation of the actions and discussions of the governing body at all of its regular and special meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGee.
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Fritzen. And good evening again. I will now run through the agenda briefly. We will start with the proclamation for LGBTQ Pride Month, read by Mr. Daffis. We will then have our first public comment on agenda items only. I'd like to recognize that Ethan Solowski will have some words for us. He is a 4th grader, and a 10-year-old from Seth Boyden. Then after that, we will go into our Board of Health meeting, led by Deputy Mayor Steve Daffis and Candace Davenport. We have one ordinance on final passage. So we'll listen to that regarding the street address numbers in the township. We'll move on to our 2 ordinances for this evening. Both are related to traffic. The first one is the installation of a multi-way stop sign at Burnett and Rutgers. And then the second is a multi-stop sign installation at Prospect and Harvard. After that, we'll have reports from departments, which will be followed by our administrative reports, Mr. Veros, Mr. Desiderio, and Ms. Fritzen. We'll then hear from the elected officials and their reports. And then we'll go into our discussion items. We have one discussion item for this evening, led by Mr. Daffis, regarding backyard above ground swimming pools in our COVID-19 summer. We'll then move on to our consent agenda. We have a total of 10 items on the consent agenda, inclusive of the pool renovations and awarding of the contract of that, awarding a contract of the Park Avenue Sanitary Sewer Emergency Repair Project, authorization for a change order for Boyden Avenue roadway improvements, a refund of a tax overpayment, authorizing our tax collector to process 3rd quarter estimated tax bills due August 1st, accepting the report on note of sale, the approving of emergency temporary appropriations, bills and claims, and regular session minutes. We'll then go into our second and final public comment on any item whatsoever, and then we will adjourn. So, an average agenda for this evening, but as Mr. Palmer said, hopefully it'll be short. So thank you for jinxing us, Mr. Palmer, and we will now start the meeting. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Deputy Mayor Daffis to read the proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor. As you said earlier in your remarks about Jerry and as others underscored, a lot of people before me have done the work to ensure that Maplewood is the diverse and inclusive community that we all enjoy. And one of those people is the Honorable Vic DeLuca, who is still doing the work. And Vic has a long history and remarkable history in being a great LGBTQ ally. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize him as we proclaim June as Pride Month this evening. We are a diverse and inclusive community in which our residents take great pride in that diversity. We believe in the safety, prosperity, and equality and hope for all who live and work in our town. We recognize the human rights of all citizens and support to end all forms of prejudice and discrimination. We recognize that the LGBTQ community has made important contributions to the history and quality of life of our nation and of our community in Maplewood in particular. The Township Committee and the Township of Maplewood remain committed to promoting that equality and fostering welcoming and supportive environments for all peoples. We cannot forget that the LGBTQ community, as I alluded to earlier in my remarks, and their families across the country continue to face significant forms of oppression and discrimination. Now, therefore, I, Deputy Mayor Dean Daffis, along with Mayor Frank McGehee, on behalf of our colleagues, the entire Township Committee of Maplewood, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2020 as LGBTQ Pride Month in the Township of Maplewood. And we urge all of our citizens to celebrate diversity and inclusion, promote equality. That's key, right? That's where we talk about words are cheap, celebrations are cheap, actions matter more. Promote equality, acknowledge the achievements and contributions of the LGBTQ community, and strive to eliminate prejudice everywhere that it exists. Because if we lift each other up, we will all truly be free and equal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There's some applause for you there. All right. We'll now go into our first public comment. Glenn, do we have Ethan Solowski on the phone here? There he is. Hey,
There's Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and other members of the Township Committee. It is an honor to be here tonight. As you might know, I'm here to introduce the project, a Maplewood Town slogan. With everything that is happening across the country right now, and with the start of Pride Month, I think now is a good time to remind people what Maplewood is all about. And I believe that my slogan is a good way to express what a unique community we are. Maplewood, where everyone is welcome and there is always room for more. Thank you, and again, it is an honor to be here.
Ethan, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us this evening. We hope we didn't keep you up too late past your bedtime, and we look forward to working with you on your project. So thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you.
Now there's a future leader right there. President.
Absolutely.
All the way.
Absolutely. We're just keeping the chairs warm for him. Nick, do we have any more, Mr. Wallace, do we have any more comments regarding agenda items?
At this time, no, Mayor, no public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Seeing no more public comments, I will close that agenda item and we'll move forward to our Board of Health meeting. Deputy Mayor Daffis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's get to it. We have a lot to cover in the Board of Health this evening. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of New Jersey, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2020 to the News Record and Star Ledger in December 2019, and by filing said notice in the office of the Township Clerk. Ms. Fritzen, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Adams?
Here.
Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Glenbrick?
Here.
Mayor McGehee?
Here.
Mr. Daffis?
Here. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen.
Whereas Chapter 231 Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires that all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the Board of Health has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting, And whereas the desire of the governing of the Maplewood Board of Health to comply with the provisions of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner. Now therefore be it resolved by the Maplewood Board of Health, Township of Maplewood, does hereby prohibit except set forth in the formal agenda. Active participation in the deliberations of the Board of Health by the public and except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to the observation of the actions and discussions of the Board of Health at all of its regular and special meetings.
So moved.
Second,
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis.
Yes. I now make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 5th, 2020 Board of Health meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Ms. Davenport, you have the floor, or the Zoom in this case.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you. Oh, Glenn, if you can allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, I got you. Hold on one second.
Thank
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so this is the public health report from the Board of Health Health Officer for the month of May. I just want to say that we've had a lot of Zoom calls. We participated in the Hilton Neighborhood Association. Mr. DeLuca and Mayor McGehee participated. Always is a pleasure to talk with the Hilton Neighborhood Association. And then Anna Markarova and I spoke with the seniors through the SOMA Two Towns for All Ages Zoom call recently. So that was a pleasure to talk with them as well. Let me just move on to say happy Pride Month to everyone. Here are some healthcare resources that I just want to make sure that we get out there to people because I think it's super important. And my LGBTQ colleagues have always said that it's hard, but getting hopefully easier to find healthcare providers who understand the specific needs of people who are LGBTQ and who have it's the same health issues, but there are sensitivities and concerns that need to be addressed delicately and sensitively by healthcare providers. So I just want to provide those resources for the community. Moving on to coronavirus update. These are the numbers as we are of today, June 2nd. In New Jersey, we have 161,545 confirmed cases. We have exceeded 11,000 deaths in New Jersey. It's a grave number, and I want to just meditate on that for a second. In Essex County, we have a total of 17,752 cases. I also want to say that we are increasing in testing, so the more we're testing, the more we're finding positive cases. And our total deaths are there for Essex County. In Maplewood, we're holding at 299 cases. We had no change from yesterday, and unfortunately, we have lost 25 members of our community. And we feel for those families as well. Here's the status of our cases as of now. I just want to note that we have 299 cases, but of those total, 215 are recovered cases. So we have 84 cases that are actively being monitored right now. It is important to note that in the last month, since my last report to you on May 4th, we've had a total of 36 cases. So that's significant compared to from April 1st to May 4th, we had a total of 205. So you can see that swift incline from last month, and then this month was just a smaller lean into. What I had mentioned in the last Board of Health presentation was those two lines, the orange and the blue line, should intersect. And the positive picture would be where the orange or the recovered numbers goes up and exceeds the blue line, which is the new cases, and that number goes down. We're getting closer, we're narrowing that gap, but we still have a ways to go. So we are carefully monitoring that. This is the number of our daily new cases. As you can see, our peak, as mentioned before, was in mid-April. However, we're still seeing cases, and they are holding at about 4 or 5 cases on average daily. So as we open up more and lift more of the restrictions, we are carefully monitoring how our new cases are coming up. We hope that they stay low. This is the age distribution of COVID cases total cumulatively for Maplewood. As you can see, the number of cases that we have hit around the middle age range. The 40s to 49 is about 20% of our cases. 50 to 59-year-olds are about 27%, and the 60 to 69-year-olds are about 18%. Everyone else is less than 15%. This is a really good thing for looking at pediatric cases. We've had very few pediatric cases. However, there is sequelae that we're looking at for the children, as we mentioned before, with the multisystem inflammatory syndrome, which is specific to a younger age group, but going into their teens. And we're seeing in people, in young adults, in their late teens, early 20s, and early 30s, relatively healthy, no underlying health conditions, but are experiencing the side effects of COVID, which are stroke, clotting, and other respiratory or major organ issues. So we just want to keep bringing that to the attention of everyone, that while you might be diagnosed with COVID and may not show any symptoms, unfortunately, COVID is something we are constantly monitoring and seeing sequelae almost a month or 2 months afterward. To give you an update of our cases, as you can see, there are gaps in the number of deaths that we've had, but our most recent unfortunate passing of a resident was on May 25th. So we have had several deaths in the last month from May 4th, May 6th, May 7th, and May 18th. There might be a delay in reporting because of how the reporting mechanism is coming in from the state. But again, we are tracking those as well. This is the breakdown of COVID deaths by gender. As I should mention, our reporting oddly mimics the state parameters and distribution along with gender. It's about a 50-50 breakdown, and that's what the state is also looking at as well. As I had mentioned before, and oddly enough, when we talk about the events and the demographics and the people affected in Maplewood, we are mimicking the national experience. As I mentioned, it's the essential workers who are out there and getting infected because they are serving the community. The more and more we open up certain things, I just really want people to understand that COVID is not gone. So I have to make that very clear, that COVID is not gone. So we have to still provide education, still reiterate the message that social distancing and face masks are important in order for us to move forward, in order for us to open, in order for us to continue. We do have to take those proper precautions. So testing has been a big issue and a very positive issue. I just want to give you the data that as of May 20th, the county was able to provide to us that as of then, May 20th, the percent of Maplewood residents who have gotten the COVID viral test or PCR test was about almost 4% of our total number. I foresee that as more testing comes up, more of our residents will go get tested. So, but this is a good number because Essex County in total was 5.7%. The number percent positive of our viral testing was 28.4%. So of those 3.9% of people who tested, 28 tested positive. Antibodies is the second test. The antibody or serology test tells you that you've been exposed. It gives you like the back view, rear view mirror image of what happened before. So you can see that, let me just move my screen here. For Maplewood, we had a total number of 444 antibody tests, and of those, 391 were negative and 53 were positive. So we are increasing on testing on both fronts, both antiviral as well as PCR viral testing. Just want to highlight, oh yes.
Davenport, can I stop you there for a
Sure.
minute? Because I think there's an opportunity here for a little bit of community education and
Absolutely.
advocacy. As you know, I've been tagged in several social media threads the past few days. Maybe my colleagues have as well. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, and at least confusion about the PCR test, the viral test, versus the serology, or otherwise known as antibody test. I've heard from too many residents in the community, I should say, who are waiting to have an antibody test or a serology test. They're not being tested today, even when they can be tested, even though we've expanded testing, because they believe that the antibody testing will give them a greater sense of relief and hope. And the idea here is that if you test positive for antibodies, according to this theory, then you're immune from reinfection and therefore you're okay. However, you know, and I know that that's not what the science says. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Okay, thank you. So let me break it down because it is confusing. The serology or antibody test, while it is testing for antibodies, and technically when you produce antibodies, it should prove that you're immune. The problem is that because of coronavirus, science has not been able to determine how long you will have that immunity for. And unfortunately, we are still seeing cases where people have been infected, have recovered, and then have gotten sick again from COVID. So are these anomalies, or is this the pattern of COVID? We're still not sure.
Can you say that again, please? I think that's a very powerful statement and very important.
Sure. So what we are finding is that people can have COVID, have symptoms, then recover, and then get sick again. And we're not sure if those cases are anomalies or if they are what is the nature of COVID-19. So, and again, you could be positive and then have symptoms, covered, and then get it again, either in a milder form or asymptomatic, but still be able to spread it. So here's the thing, the antibody test helps public health officials and scientists to determine if a community has been affected and to what extent. It helps us to identify how many people have been exposed and to determine the gravity of which it affected a community. So it really is more of like a rear view mirror view of like who was exposed here and how many. So for example, we're doing testing in a congregate setting, like a factory or a hospital or a senior living community. You can use the antibody test to find out how many people didn't show symptoms, but had COVID and never knew it. So that's where it becomes very telling. It is super important though for everyone to take advantage of COVID testing for PCR testing, especially as you go out into the community and begin to participate in societal activities. The more and more we go out, the more and more you have to assume. And I know this is a big thing to ask, but I'm going to make it very clear. Assume that when you go out into a large gathering that someone has COVID. That's how you have to behave when you go out in the community now. Assume someone you know or someone you don't know. If you go out into the public space, assume they have COVID. And that's how we're going to talk about face masking, social distancing. Those are the two most important things we can do. And if we do it safely, we can engage in the community and we can go back to some sort of new normal where we are participating in activities and living a life where we're not afraid to go outside, but we do have to public health measures in order to do it safely and not increase the number of cases. Does that help, Mr. Davis?
It does, thank you. So you can move on and tell people about the testing opportunities currently available.
You got it. All right, so here's some positive news. We have or Essex County, who's been offering it at Weequahic Park, and you'll see it on the side there. They offer it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. They are doing a roving Essex County testing site locations, and it's coming to Maplewood on June 4th. We're super proud of the county that they're coming over here, and it'll be offered in the evening from 4 to 6:30 p.m. It'll be drive-through, but they'll also have a walk-up component. Regardless, you still have to make an appointment at essexcovid.org. So whether you drive in or walk up because you don't have a car, your car's in the shop, you still have to register for an appointment at essexcovid.org. If you don't have access to the internet, you can also call 973-324-9950 to make your appointment. They should have about 225 to 250 spots available. It is free, so please take advantage of it. I would say that anyone who is already in the essential worker workforce and their family members should take advantage of it. And it'll be a swab or saliva test. So that is awesome instead of the nasopharyngeal, which is very uncomfortable. We are also offering at CVS Pharmacy right on Valley Street at 450, Valley, it's supposed to be Valley Street. I don't know why they keep saying Valley Road. This is actually off of CVS Pharmacy's website, but it's on 453 Valley Street in Maplewood. It is a drive-up coronavirus test, and you just click over there for available times and another way to increase testing. We are also working on MOUs with Salerno Medical to bring them to Maplewood to have a pop-up site more consistently here in town for everyone. So that is coming. So I just want to say a message about face masks, because there might be, it's great that we had the declaration, but there still may be some confusion about face masks or facial coverings. So I just want to reiterate that people can have COVID-19 and not show any symptoms. So COVID-19 is spread through contact with someone's respiratory droplets, which you can get when people cough, sneeze, talk, sing, yell, and it goes 6 feet. They may not realize that they've been exposed to COVID, a COVID positive person, and then in turn, because they're not showing the symptoms and may not have realized that they were exposed to someone, they can spread COVID-19 to others because they're now carrying it. So therefore, a cloth or surgical face mask covering helps to protect others from you and your respiratory droplets. So let me reiterate that again. A face mask that people are wearing now out in the open, or a face covering, does not protect you. It protects others from you and your respiratory droplets, because you might be carrying COVID and not realizing it. You may be asymptomatic and not realizing it. So if we all wear face masks and face coverings when we're in a group of people, we are protecting each other. However, if I'm alone sitting by myself and there's no one around me and I'm not with anyone, I don't have to wear the face mask, but it is a courtesy to wear it when you cannot maintain a 6-foot distance from other people or are going to be in a group or gathering.
Mr. Daffis, could I say something?
Sure.
Adams, go ahead.
Mostly I was just generally the 6 feet thing, but I've heard recently, I one of the, expert doctors or whatever, because talking about protests, and many of our residents may be participating in protests, that when people sneeze, it goes 12 feet. When people yell, they don't know how far, but it's farther than just, like 6 feet is really just talking.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, emphasizes the point of people needing to wear face masks when they're amidst other people, and especially in upcoming potential protests that people are going on. So I just wanted to emphasize that a little bit.
No, thank you, Ms. Adams. That's actually, I have a couple of slides up ahead. So you must have seen my slides. We will be actually talking about that. So thank you so much for that. That is important. I want to go to Governor Murphy's multi-stage blueprint for reopening, excuse me. You can find this on covid19.nj.gov. This is the outline for some common questions that people have, and what do those look like at the different phases or stages that he talks about on his daily. So to just highlight some major things here, what precautions apply across all the stages up until the end, because we are going into a new normal. So the more we get buy-in on this, and the more we get everyone into this, the more we will move into a new normal, and it will make sense to everyone that you need to wash your hands regularly, wear masks in public, respect the social distancing, and then limit gatherings and mass. It says no mass gatherings. Well, that was before everything took place recently. So I will talk about that and disinfecting workspaces. I also want to emphasize that there is a new normal, which is the area in green. Our new normal will be when we have a widespread use of a vaccine or life-saving treatment, when all people can resume work in person and not just from home, and where measures for previous strategy stages may be swiftly reinstated if health conditions deteriorate, which means if we open something and we start to see, like in local health departments and hospitals around the country, that numbers are increasing to the point where it is escalating at a rapid scale, we will need to consider scaling back, and that's going to be part of the planning here. Here you'll see, I just want to do a shout out to my colleagues at the DEP. As you are going out to enjoy our public parks and beaches and boardwalks, please mask up. This is their new social media flyer and poster. So I just wanted to say that multiple statewide programs are emphasizing this, because it is affecting us and how we live everywhere. So as Ms. Adams mentioned, we have to talk about, honestly, civic engagement, because it's important during a global pandemic, which is the current condition and situation we're in right now. Both of these are super important and happening at the same time. So can we do things like protests? Can we do them, but safely, living and understanding the new normal that we're in? So let me first say that it is vital for all of us to exercise our First Amendment right to speak out against social injustice, institutional racism, and violence. It is a public health issue. However, we would also recommend and strongly recommend that protest organizers should encourage participants to follow CDC state and local government guidance for gatherings, such as we've mentioned before. I also want to say that the recent and tragic death of George Floyd in Minneapolis has activated national outrage over this violent and brutal death, a scene that should never be repeated, and we must fight to prevent it for him and all the other lives who have died senselessly due to racism and inequality. But most of all, we must fight for our children and future generations, so that they never have to live in fear, as our children unfortunately already do. So this slide is a little bit more taking it on a positive note. Can we do civic engagement during a global pandemic and reimagine what it could look like? This is a picture of April 19th, 2020, where protesters in Israel were conducting a protest in Rabin Square in Tel Aviv. You can see that there's a massive amount of people. They actively protested, but they stood 6 feet apart. It is possible to do this. It is possible to engage civically within a global pandemic safely. However, I would be remiss if I didn't say that there are other ways that people can engage in civic engagement, but virtually. So here are some examples that people can go to they can go to the National Constitution Center and learn about the Constitution, ways to challenge the Constitution, ways to talk about the Constitution and our amendment rights. You can reach out to local nonprofits to offer help. Institutional racism is not just about talking about race. It's also about making changes in many other areas like reproductive health, maternal child health, advocating for an increase in the minimum wage, making sure that people vote, as Mr. DeLuca mentioned earlier, reducing the achievement gap in education, job security, housing, and fighting for criminal justice reform. So as we mentioned before, institutional racism and changing that tangled web that we all live in is going to take time, but we all can do something and participate and find those sources now to help out. Support local journalism and write letters to the editor, do your op-eds, and reach out to state and local legislators and our elected officials, such as those on the Township Committee. I reached out to a fellow colleague of mine who you all know was our public health nurse, Marilyn Locke. She moved to Georgia, and given the climate and everything that's happening, I reached out to her to ask her how we can help out based on what Ms. Adams had said earlier. So I actually did this in real time as we were talking, because it really, I can understand how that must feel. It's difficult to find the words and feel how you can help and how to talk about it. So I reached out to my friend, Marilyn Locke, who is a public health nurse, nurse practitioner, and a Haitian American who understands all too well what this feels like. And she gave me this, this resource. So these are just some ideas that people can do to talk about that conversation. And the thing that she mentioned to me the most was, you know, along with the protests, along with being together in that communal space and fighting for what's right, we also need to get together in smaller groups in a safe environment, have smaller groups of conversations where we listen and talk and understand one another. And I believe that she's right, that we have to use both mechanisms, large gatherings to express our First Amendment right of freedom of speech, but also the freedom of speech to speak in a safe environment with people who we trust and who will understand or try to understand and reach out. I also want to highlight that COVID-19, as well as recent national events, can exacerbate not only anxiety and depression, but also other mental health issues like increase in substance use, domestic or intimate partner violence, and hoarding. So while May was Mental Health Awareness Month, I do want to raise attention to the Township's mental health page with free resources that are active in Essex County and throughout New Jersey still at this time. My social worker colleagues and counselors know that even with COVID, their work doesn't stop. Moving off.
Can I stop
yes.
you there for a minute? Just,
Sure.
We're just breaking this up a little bit. And I have a couple of follow-up questions I think that are important for the community to the extent anyone's watching. I want to make a point here, and this is really, really critical, right? Because we have a lot of people out there who are just over it, right? They don't want to do the social distancing. They're tired of wearing a face covering. But so it's really, really important to make the following point. Okay, and the governor did this really, really well this afternoon with our health commissioner, our state health commissioner. They were talking about the rate of spread, COVID-19's rate of reproduction, they call it, I think. And this is really, really crystallizes how important social distancing and face coverings of some sort when you're outdoors, period. When you're outdoors, period. Be extra cautious how important those things are, how life-saving they are. So back in March 21st, when we first went into a lockdown, the rate of infection, one single person who was asymptomatic but had the virus,
yep.
They were infecting over 5 other people unknowingly and unwillingly throughout the state. 5.31 persons. Think about that. Fortunately, today, only because of social distancing, only because of face coverings and staying at home as much as possible, we are at below one person at, I think it was like 0.8 or something like that, which is incredible in just a short period of time. But if you really think about it, it just shows that the only cure, the only control that we have right now, I know we want to live our lives, but we also don't want to get sick. And the only thing stopping us from getting sick is wearing something, covering your damn face when you go outside, and maintaining a distance from others. That's it. That's how inconvenient and how hard it is. It really isn't. That is all that we have to do until we get a vaccine. So I really thought when I heard that and I watched the press conference, it was really eye-opening for me. And I wanted to share it with everybody out there. I also wanted to share the following. There are a lot of people in our community who think that this virus has not touched them, will never touch them. Okay, let's be honest here. We're talking honesty tonight, right? We're calling to action against systemic racism and hate and bias. So let's be real. There are a lot of damn people in our community who feel that, you know what, this is a Black poor person virus. This is a first responder virus. So you know what? I ain't gonna do anything about it because it's not gonna affect me. Well, let me tell you something. There have been, as you reported, Ms. Davenport, over 11,000 deaths in our state. Okay? Nearly 12,000 deaths. You said 11,770.
Yes.
That is more deaths, more precious lives lost in our state in just 2 months than the lives that we lost during World War II over the course of 4 years of war. So, I mean, really let that sink in. And don't take your life or certainly anyone else's life for granted. Wear a damn face covering when you go outside of some sort. They're even fashionable now, okay? So support your local business, get something sexy, wear it on your face, and be responsible. We are all in this together. This pandemic is going to continue claiming lives until we all do the responsible thing together. So with that, I have a couple questions. One of the things that come up from residents, I'm really fired up now, as you can tell. One of the things that come up from residents is this idea of maintaining the declaration, enforcing the declaration that we made of having face coverings when you're going out into our parks, because you're likely to come into large gatherings of people. You may not be able to maintain social distancing. So we're highly recommending and we're requiring face coverings for folks. Have we, I know we were going to be working on new signs in the parks because our previous signage was, well, we had to get something out. Let's just say that. Where are we in new signage on this?
I am not sure, but I can find out when we have our department head meeting tomorrow about signage.
I can take this one.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So I know that Ms. Mancuso ordered these signs behind me, which I've been trying to highlight. They also complement the signs that we have in South Orange. So those should be ready this week, I guess the next day or so. And Mr. Kidner has ordered signs to replace the ones that we put up in the park. Remember, we had the red, the do's and the don'ts, with the basic sign that basically highlights the title of the declaration, which is basically facial coverings are required, in our public parks, and if you can't maintain social distancing, you must wear your mask.
Great, thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
And Ms. Davenport, I'm assuming the answer is no, because it's all really fresh. We have not received anything from the Department of Health as to the guidelines and requirements that pertain to outdoor dining just yet, right?
Not yet, sir, not yet. We're waiting on those as well.
Terrific. And what about as it relates to the camps, the youth camps and summer rec programs? They said they were going to release something the other day. Has that come out yet?
No, the rec department director and I talked about it this afternoon, and we both have not heard anything as of yet with a full guidance. So we're still waiting on that as well, along with childcare, which is also due to open up June 15th.
Great. So let's move on, and we have some new business here we want to cover because we're running a little bit long. Let's talk about some rat control issues that we're seeing in town, and some other things. Thanks.
We are moving, so switch hats for a little bit because health covers a lot of stuff. We have rat control. So it's spring. And every year we have rats. So as to date, we've had 52 rodent complaints. They come into the health division because we are also animal control. Of those, 90% of our rodent complaints happened in the months of April and May. They come during spring. In the last 2 days, however, we've had 18 additional complaints. So June is not looking very good for us. However, it's been a multi-department effort. You'll see the inside cover of our brochure that we were able to distribute with the use of DPW staff who have gone door to door in certain areas to inform residents, you know, we're all in this together, and really do a combined effort to do mass education of areas that are impacted. So it's been a combined multi-department effort between myself, DPW, building and zoning. And one of the things that we're working forward is working with code enforcement, and sorry, I meant code enforcement when I wrote zoning, code enforcement and building to look at revising our permits to include that all construction, prior to construction, needs to install bait boxes so that it eliminates rats which come out during demolition or construction. Chickens, chickens, chickens. So now that everyone's been home, one of the side things that has come up is everyone is homestead on the farm and wants to, has an interest in chicken raising, which is brought up because I'm a new health officer, but been in Maplewood since 2012. I knew we had an ordinance on chickens, but now that I'm the health officer, after rereading it, we really do need to revise it. So I will be proposing a new update with some updated information on our chicken ordinance, which is ordinance 2709-13. So more to come on that lovely chicken. And other good news, we have our summer meals program 2020 coming up. This is our flyer from last year. Our summer meals program is in conjunction as a partnership with the Township of Irvington. Maplewood is a satellite and it'll occur at Maple Crest Park. Dates and times it will be determined, but it'll be a grab and go. We have received confirmation from the Board of Ed through the administrator's office that they will be proposing that to the Board of Ed on their agenda in June, but they are favorable that it will happen this year. So we are moving forward with it, and dates will be determined because we want to follow up with after the Board of Ed and the school district actually stop their process of providing meals to children, since it's the same program through the USDA. And that's pretty much it. I also want to say that our numbers of kids that we are feeding daily through the school district program has increased roughly on average 250 meals a day. So the devastation of COVID and unemployment, as well as what was already underlying there, has really pushed us to the limit of how many children are in dire need of stable food and nourishment during this time. So we are happy to push that forward through the summer meals program. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Davenport. From the public, the question for Ms. Davenport.
I don't have any public comment for the Board of Health, Mr. Daffis.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. I invite my colleagues if they have any statements they want to make or questions they want to ask.
I did just have a quick one. Where in Maple Crest Park is the food going to be, the free lunch program? Because last year, I think it was under a tent something. Could we utilize the building that we have there for distribution?
We used, because it was utilized last year by the YMCA, we used the spot, which is up Boyden Parkway. So if you come up Boyden Parkway or Essex Avenue, we're right on that corner. It actually was very discreet and very accessible to people. So we're going to keep it in that location, but we will get a flag so that people can locate us easier. But I think once they find us, they know where to come now. So that's where it'll be, between Boyden Parkway and Essex Avenue on that side of Maple Crest Park.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have one more thing. I know that we have a discussion item, and I know that while that is a code issue with regard to the swimming pool, I just want to say that it's summer, and with all swimming pools, just want to make sure that I know it has to do with the amount of water in a swimming pool. I would only advise that a backyard swimming pool, if it's small enough to be drained regularly, not only for reducing the risk of drowning for anyone who inadvertently goes there, like a small child, but also to reduce mosquito breeding. So every 3 days, please drain a small kiddie pool. Also, maintain the grass and bushes around the area to reduce mosquitoes. And again, please always have a guardian on site whenever there's a small child or toddler around any body of water, because they can drown in any, even just the smallest amount of water. So those are my only public health recommendations for that discussion item.
Ms. Davenport, thank you. And if you kindly stick around with us, we might bring you into the conversation when we get to that discussion item on the swimming pools. I appreciate your report. Excellent, thorough report. And I move that we adjourn our public.
Second.
Oh, and we have a second. Ms. Fritzen. Roll call, please.
I don't see her anywhere. Can Roger do the roll call?
I just saw Liz. Where did she go?
I think she may have hit the wrong button.
She is not on.
Is she there?
No.
She's not.
Okay, the answer is I'll do the roll call. I may not do it in alphabetical order. I apologize.
Good, I like
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes to adjourning.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis.
Yes.
Okay, you're adjourned, and I think that Liz did this just to see that I was still awake. That's why she did that. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I hope you have a copy of your agenda, because you're on now. All right. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daffis, and thank you, Health Officer Ms. Davenport, for your robust and very informative and excellent report. We will now move on to our ordinance on final passage. Mr. Desiderio.
Mayor, this is an ordinance requiring the. Am I on, Mayor?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is an ordinance requiring the conspicuous placement of street address numbers on all buildings in the township of Maplewood. This ordinance is intended to assist public safety personnel in locating destinations to which they are called.
This ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Mr. Waltz, do we have anyone who would like to speak on this ordinance?
We don't, Mr. Mayor. I'm on the phone with Nick now.
Okay. Hearing no one, we will close the hearing. May I get a motion, Miss Dafis.
Well done, Mayor. Yes. I move this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
Second.
Any discussion?
None.
Hearing none, we'll call the roll. Mr. Desiderio, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Dafis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. We now have the introduction of a new ordinance.
Yes, Mayor. Introduction of new ordinance 3. By the way, I would note that this is ordinance number 3000-20.
Yeah.
An ordinance to direct the installation of multi-way stop signs at Burnett Avenue and Rutgers Street. This ordinance will direct the installation of multi-way stop signs at Burnett Avenue and Rutgers Street.
Ms. Adams, may we have a motion, please?
Yes, I move I move the passage of this ordinance on its first reading, its publication according to law in the Maplewood South Orange News Record, and a hearing to be held on June 16th.
Second.
Perfect. Mr. Desiderio, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Dafis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. We have our second ordinance on introduction.
I'm back.
Well, congratulations. I'm on a roll. An ordinance to direct the installation of multi-way stop signs at Prospect Street and Harvard Avenue. This ordinance will direct the installation of multi-way stop signs at Prospect Street and Harvard Avenue.
Ms. Adams, may we have a motion, please?
I move the passage of this ordinance on its first reading, its publication according to law in the Maplewood South Orange News Record, and a hearing to be held on June 16th.
Second.
Mr. Desiderio. Oh, Ms.
I defer to Ms. Fritzen.
Fair enough. Ms. Fritzen, please
Adams.
call the roll.
Yes.
Ms. Adams.
Yes. Twice.
Dafis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes. Thank you and welcome back, Ms. Fritzen.
Thank you.
We're now, you're welcome. We're now on agenda item number 11, reports from departments. Mr. Veros, do we have any reports that need to be discussed outside of your report that's coming?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Hearing that we have no reports from departments for this meeting, we will move on to administrative reports. And Ms. Viveros, nice segue. You do have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to bring up the memorandum of agreement. This is with regard to the Firefighters Mutual Benevolent Association, also known as the FMBA Local 25. I presented to the Township Committee an MOA that their membership have ratified. It is a 4-year term contract with wages at 2% in the first year, second year 2%, third year 2.25%, and fourth year 2.25%. Otherwise, other terms were with regard to procedure and process. Overall, it was a lengthy experience, but nonetheless, they have been a pleasure to work with. And given the situation today, you can only see that morale with regard to the FMBA is up, and they continue to do a fantastic job during this pandemic. So, and we've ultimately did this during pandemic. So I congratulate everybody for coming forth and getting it together. So if anyone has any questions specific to the MOA.
Nice job, Sonia. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
What I'd ask is a motion to accept the memorandum of agreement subject to the formalization of a contract that'll be drafted and then presented with a formal resolution.
So
I'll
moved.
make that motion. I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Lembrecht,
Yes.
Mayor McGee.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mayor.
Viveros, go ahead.
I also wanted to update the public on the township operations. We are working behind the scenes, although our doors are closed. We are working with the public on permits and anything else. So specifically, this past Monday, yesterday we opened up our farmers market over at the Yale Corner. Given some of the executive orders that the governor just announced last week, and of course this week, we are preparing our buildings to make sure that they are safe for both our employees and for the public. With that, our spaces are being prepped with clear barriers. We did get some today over in our town hall building. I have to say they look great. They don't look obtrusive. They're actually welcoming. I think it looks right in the space. So I welcome anyone, if you have some time, to walk through some of these spaces. We also are preparing our jitneys, retrofitting some of these things. We're making sure that we have a good stockpile of PPE and also hand sanitizers. We're going to be promoting a lot of our online permitting, online payments that could be made. We're working with our systems to do that. And one of the new additions at our counters, when residents do visit us in the near future, is kiosks. And that if there is an ability to complete any sort of permitting, any camp registrations, any program registrations, you can certainly do that at these kiosks. So we're trying to make sure that we're working with our IT, our department heads, that these things are set up for the public, because the future of our normal is to make sure that the safety of our staff and our residents is implemented throughout our buildings. We are having a lot of public briefings, and we'll continue to have them to make sure that the public is informed about what we're doing throughout the township. And Mayor, just the third item that I'd like to also echo my sentiments to not only the current pandemic, but what's happening in America, is that my task here at hand is to also create a workplace environment and create some cultural changes. And I think we've been aiming to do that. And part of that is to make sure that, and I was working actually before this pandemic started to hit, in working on a welcoming initiative for our staffs. And I'm going to continue to do that and make sure that that is my path, to make sure that government, that we don't work off of systems and off of silos and off of a one-way avenue, and that we do make sure that we address every citizen as one Maplewood, as one New Jersey, and as one United States. And not being a natural born citizen here and now a citizen, I am proud to be an American, and I want to make sure that I create that same environment in our workplace. So with that, that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. Viveros. That's the right type of culture that we want. I appreciate your leadership in that regard. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Viveros? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Desiderio?
Yeah, Ms. Viveros, I'm gonna report on that roof bid. Is that okay, or did you skip that on purpose, or?
No, I didn't skip that on purpose. I think that was.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The engineering department received bids for the roof and HVAC system at Town Hall. I did circulate a memo to everybody. Effectively, there were multiple bidders. However, the bids that were within the scope of the money that was available all need to be rejected for flaws, the result of which is the matter needs to go out for rebid. So what I would ask is that there be a motion to allow engineering to go out for a rebid on the roof at Town Hall and HVAC system.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
You're muted, Liz.
Can't hear you.
Yes.
Oh, come on.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Got
Mr.
it.
DeLuca,
I got it.
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Desiderio.
I have just one more thing. I would be remiss if I did not say that the passing of Jerry Ryan has affected me very deeply. I was with Jerry from the beginning in 1992 when he fought his battle in court for a recount on the election and to be elected, and I had the benefit of serving with him for many years. And Jerry was a very, very bright guy with maybe the best memory of anybody that I have ever met. And I simply just want to say, and I got to see him within the last week or so before he passed. And I just want to say that as a Maplewood resident, we are all better for having had Jerry Ryan in our lives and for having him served the community. So I will miss him deeply. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Desiderio? Hearing none, Ms. Fritzen, we'll now hear from you for your report.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the primary election, the July 7th vote by mail ballot election. And since we had our last township committee meeting, as you all know, we have been granted our particular choices for 2 on-site polling locations. And that was following OEM meeting where that was discussed. And the recommendations of number 1 being Maplewood Community Center, number 2 being the Woodland were both accepted. So that's a good thing. So I wanted to find out, you know, what exactly does that mean? So I reached out to the Board of Elections, specifically Linda Von Essie, and I'm going to read to you the response that I got. Actually, the second response, just to clarify even the first response, and that is that the polling place is only for a voter to vote a paper provisional ballot. If someone is sight impaired, they can vote on an audio component of the voting machine, which is always available. There will be no machine for voters to cast a ballot other than the audio component that is for the disabled. Other than that, as we've all been stressing, it is mostly an all-mail election, MAIL election. So we are going to put together all of the facts that go along with this election. And in a way, I've been waiting to get every component before we put a blast out to the Maplewood public. So I think this is probably the last component that we've been waiting for to explain what does that really mean. Yes, we have polling locations, but there's no machines are going to be there. And then, of course, everything I covered 2 weeks ago is still the same. And I think that Mr. Daffis and I are going to get together and put together a release. And I think, again, we have all the components now to explain it properly and simply to the public. We're also scheduled for later on in the week to do walkthroughs of the 2 buildings And I'll be letting those that are interested in attending as to when that is. But we're going to go over a lot of the standards that we're going to put into place for safety for the voters and also for our workers and the board workers that would be at those two locations. So that's my report. Right now, I'm putting a lot of attention towards an election that's only a month away. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any about the election.
Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Fritzen? Mr. DeLuca.
So just following up on some of our planning. So with provisional ballots, people will be sitting at a table and marking up a paper ballot, correct?
Correct.
So we're going to need to set up some stations and then work with Mr. Kittner on how we're going to get those cleaned after each voter, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you're on that?
Actually, Mr. Kittner and I have been speaking about that. He and I are setting up a tour. I wouldn't have a tour certainly without anybody from OEM that's interested in attending, and Mr. Kittner. And whatever DPW staff he feels is appropriate at the walkthrough.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Any more questions for Ms. Fritzen?
I have one question, Mayor. Thank you. Ms. Fritzen, I know you're also about to, as you're preparing for the election just a month away, as you said, you're also about to get hit with an onslaught of applications for outdoor dining. And we're going to be meeting in the morning, as you know, to cover those particulars. Do you currently feel like you have the appropriate staffing support that you need to cover everything?
Mr. Daffis, I think that through the township administrator, we'll be talking about that as far as adding some help for the department. So I feel like it's certainly on the radar and we will be discussing that.
Good to hear. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Any more questions for Ms. Fritzen? Okay. Ms. Fritzen, thank you for your report. Appreciate it. We'll now move on. You're welcome. We'll now move on to reports from elected officials. Mr. Limbrick, we'll let you lead off, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the past few days, while the national media has focused on sensationalistic images of demonstrations here in the United States, there have also been, as the photo that Ms. Davenport showed earlier, protests all over the world, people marching in the street throughout Europe, Africa, Asia, and these are places that are likewise facing a pandemic, and many of them have been breaking their own lockdowns to stand in solidarity with those demanding change here in America. And I think it's because they recognize the hope that America represents and how important it is for the cause of freedom and all of humankind. And I think that they, like us, are tired of seeing America squander opportunities to evolve and change for the better. So I've been thinking about how we can express our shared values and advocate for lasting, meaningful change to support our Black neighbors and to use this period of pain and anguish to ensure that we do better moving forward. And I've been thinking about this through the lens of being chair of the Public Safety Committee here in Maplewood, working with, closely with our police officers, particularly our command staff here in town. And the injustice that we've seen in Minnesota really I see as a call for us to focus as local leaders on issues here at home in New Jersey. The laws and institutions here in New Jersey that protect bad and brutal officers are arguably even stronger than those in Minnesota. I've heard many over the past week or so ask whether the George Floyd situation would have been handled differently had it occurred here in New Jersey. And I think the answer is yes, and it probably would have been handled worse. The consequences for the officers involved likely would have been much slower in coming and not nearly as severe. The officers responsible for Mr. Floyd's death were fired within days. In New Jersey, I'm confident when I say that they would still be on administrative leave, likely still be being paid, and there'd be investigations and hearings pending likely for months before anything could be done. No matter how much elected officials like us wanted to fire them, we'd be told that we couldn't, that the unions would fight us, the courts would reinstate them, and that not only would we have to return those officers' guns and badges, but also pay them damages and cover their legal fees. Fortunately, the state in the last few years has adopted legislation providing that an independent prosecutor investigate where death results from a police incident. This was a huge step forward, helping to eliminate the inherent conflicts of interest involved when local prosecutors' offices are responsible for investigating and possibly charging the same police officers upon whom they rely to testify and build their criminal cases, and potentially damaging their relationships with departments and officers. This incestuous relationship is compounded given the frequent revolving door between local police departments and county prosecutors' offices, and also the fact that it's not uncommon for police officers to have friends or even family members in those offices. Based upon my experience and observation, for example, I have no confidence that the Essex County Prosecutor's Office would file criminal charges against the officers involved in Mr. Floyd's murder, much less murder charges, and certainly not within a week of the incident. For these reasons, I think we need to go further and expand the scope of the special prosecutor in New Jersey to include all acts of police use of force, regardless of whether a death is involved. We've seen instances in our own community, even in the last few years, where unnecessary force has been used and our hands have been tied in trying to address it. Local police departments can't even move forward with internal affairs proceedings and discipline of officers until the prosecutor's office completes its investigation, which often takes months. Then departments start an internal affairs process that is not only completely outside of public view, but also largely confidential even from local elected officials like us. And while there have been some reforms that now allow other law enforcement agencies to access, albeit in a limited manner, the disciplinary history of officers who may be seeking employment elsewhere with a new department, this information remains largely hidden from the communities those officers serve. The system in New Jersey makes removing bad, brutal officers nearly an insurmountable endeavor. We need to fight for reform in Trenton and push back against the police unions and their blue walls. I believe that we can respect the job that our police officers do and provide them the protections they need while also protecting our vulnerable communities, and particularly people of color who far too often fall victim to police misconduct. The balance is off and needs to be fixed. I look forward to working with our chief, our command staff, as well as our rank and file officers here in Maplewood to find appropriate ways and effective ways to advocate for change. I know that they agree that police misconduct, like the murder of Mr. Floyd, brings dishonor upon all police officers and is a disservice to our communities. Mr. Daffis and I will be meeting tomorrow night with the Community Board on Police for our monthly meeting, and I expect that there will be a vigorous discussion about how our community can continue to create change at the local level and advocate for reform and accountability at the county, state, and national level. I know that you'll be speaking more either tonight or going forward about a public forum and continuing those discussions, broadening those discussions, and enlarging those discussions to include people whose voices we haven't been hearing. And I guess the note I'd like to close on, as I've been, I guess, largely negative about the police, and I don't mean it to be that unbalanced, but I did want to pay tribute to some really brave and heroic efforts by our police officers and firefighters less than 24 hours ago. The fire, Mr. Mayor, that you mentioned in town that engulfed a house and spread flames to surrounding houses and vehicles was a conflagration that anyone who's seen the pictures is going to to really be moved by. And I've had the chance over the course of the day to talk to some of the police officers and firefighters who were there. And I particularly want to single out Patrolman Adrian Verdun, who was one of the first people on the scene. He's not a firefighter. He didn't have protective firefighting equipment, but he was there, and there were people inside who needed help. And he ran into a house that was completely on fire with dangerous smoke conditions and was able to pull out one resident. And then as our firefighters arrived, they were able to pull out two more people. All three of those people are fighting for their life, but because of the heroism of our police officers and firefighters, those three folks have a fighting shot. And a lot of people in the neighborhood whose houses may have been affected, are safe today because of their efforts. So, so I do want to point out that, while there's a lot of focus on, rightly, focus on when our public safety officers do wrong, I also want to honor and celebrate when they do right. And last night, their heroism and bravery was needed, and they delivered. And I love and appreciate the work that they do for our town. And that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Limbrick. Ms. Adams.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to thank Mr. Lembrick for those comments. I think as he and I in particular have served together through some very public and very difficult issues with regard to the police and the removal of our past chief of police and how difficult it was. And so I agree with pretty much everything you said. So thank you for that. I just wanted to let people know that there's some resources for the community this week for food. The next Essex County Free Food event is Thursday at 10 a.m. at the Cody Arena, curbside pickup only. All are welcome. Also on Thursday at 11 a.m. at South Mountain Y is giving out free fruit and vegetable boxes, first come, first served, curbside car pickup only. Also, all are welcome. The South Orange Maplewood School District, free hot lunch with next day breakfast to go is a pickup that's available 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Columbia High School and at Seth Boyden. So we have a lot of needs for food in this community. And so I was asked by Ms. Cuddle of the Board of Education to share that with you. So happy to do so. Just one thing on engineering, the finally, the 2019 road program has been completed virtually with midway through 2020, but a couple of very big projects, including Collinwood Road, part of Springfield Avenue on the eastern portion, and also Boyden Avenue, which was source of a lot of frustration for people. But those programs, except maybe some punch list items, are completed. And other than the statement we discussed earlier, that's my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Adams, and thank you for touching on the food insecurities. I thought that was a very important narrative we want to get out tonight, so thank you for that. Mr. DeLuca.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to report we had a very successful drive-in Memorial Day service in Rickleton Square. We worked with the VFW. They came in their cars. We had the mayor's words. We had a local rabbi say some memorial prayers. And then we had Bruno Lee playing taps. The Boy Scouts, Troop 5 participated. It was a very moving experience. So we weren't able to have the parade, but we did honor our those who have died for our country. I want to report that the library application has been submitted to the state. We beat the deadline. The deadline is this Friday. And we put together, I think, a very competitive application. And now we have to keep our fingers crossed. If there was a way to figure out how to do a fingers cross on this, I would do that. But I only know how to do a thumbs up and a clap, but we survived. Our finance committee has been meeting over the last, there you go. Very good. Thank you for the applause. Our finance committee has been meeting for over the past couple of weeks. You'll hear more about it from the mayor. Some of the choices we are going to be asked to make. And then lastly, just our emergency management team has been having briefings on various departments. And I can assure the public that we are really doing deep dives on all of our operations to make sure that we're keeping the public safe, but also our employees safe, and thinking through, based on the guidance from the state, as how we're going to be able to deliver services for our community. And we are submitting our first reimbursement, a significant reimbursement for the CARES money to the county. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. And thank you for your leadership in really spearheading our Memorial Day service. It was perfect. So thank you for that. Mr. Daffis.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to my colleagues. You covered some of the items that I was going to mention, and it just shows that we are truly a collaborative team and a very busy, active team, even during the pandemic, ensuring that we are doing everything that we can to keep the great services the community is accustomed to receiving, and to do everything that we can to honor all the appropriate celebrations that we should honor. I also want to thank Mr. Lembrick for his comments. As he mentioned, he and I will be meeting with our Maplewood Community Board on Police tomorrow evening to discuss community outreach and education and call to action at the county level and at the state level. There's a lot of opportunity for reform. Earlier today during the governor's press conference, Attorney General Grewal talked about and announced some of his new initiatives in light of everything that is going on, which shows that he appreciates that there needs to be greater local control and that there needs to be independent oversight in these investigations, especially as it relates to use of force. And as Mr. Lembrick said so well, any type of use of force, not just deadly force, any type of use of force. I also want to celebrate and thank our incredible firefighters for their heroic rescue of 3 individuals, Mayor, that you talked about so well earlier in your remarks. We pray for all 3 of them and their full recovery, and we pray for their families. It just shows with just 8 men in this particular incident, our firefighters were able to, you know, get inside of a burning building and save 3 people and save the surrounding structures. Like you said, the pictures tell the story. This is a building that is completely gone, essentially. I want to state here, I think this is important to note, that we also thank our neighboring fire department of Irvington, which showed up first in mutual aid. Irvington showed up even though the location of this fire was closer to the South Orange border. Irvington showed up from all the way of Civic Square, and South Orange did show up as well, but long after the rescue and after the fire was under control. So this is something we should keep in mind as we talk about what we're going to do with our fire department and our needs. 8 guys, 3 heroic rescues. Okay, so after I stirred up a little trouble there, I want to highlight one thing, one very important thing. Something that people are asking during this time is, you know what? I want to make a private donation. I want to help families out there. I want to help the support relief efforts. I want to help this family that was just displaced this morning by the fire. How do I do that? And please, 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 I want to do it from the comfort of my home. I don't want to come into town hall. I don't have checks. I don't want to use your Dropbox. How do I help? Well, as you know, Mayor, because you were a leader in this regard, we've always had a discretionary fund since 9/11 that we have used, that people were able to make private donations to, and that we have used to help families in crisis, to help displaced families from fire, to help families receive their Thanksgiving dinners, families on free and reduced lunch in the school district in particular, and so many other ways that we've used that discretionary fund, which, as you all recall, last year we made official. We turned it into the Maplewood Cares Trust Fund. And we worked very closely with our CFO and the Department of Community Affairs to make that an official trust fund. We were hoping to report tonight that we were going to be able to have an online link on our website that we could promote to allow people to directly donate into the trust fund. Well, as it turns out, that's a little bit complicated for government, and it comes with some transactional fees on either side of the transaction. So what we want to report to folks is that they could still do this from the comfort of their own home through a typical payment transfer, an ACH, from their bank account. All they need to do is go into their bank account online, make a payment transfer over to Township of Maplewood, and add the Maplewood Cares Fund in the memo. And that money will end up directly in the trust fund, and we can use that to support families in need during this time. Along that the $10,000 that we received from a very generous Maplewoodian toward housing issues, I proudly report that almost all of that has been utilized. We've been able to help 9 families experiencing housing insecurity right now, and we're very close to helping 1 remaining family. So that $10,000 was used up very quickly. And that's my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. And perhaps, Ms. Brolowski, we could put out an email communication regarding helping families in need and provide that information, which Mr. Daffis has communicated. So.
Sure thing. We can talk about that offline tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll be brief. I think a lot of things have been covered. I just want to say really thank you to our firefighters and our police officers for their bravery and doing the job this morning. I went by this morning and saw the home, and it's done. It's ruined, and thank goodness that they were able to get the 3 residents out. Unfortunately, they're not in the greatest shape, and they're fighting, but at least they were able to extract them from that blaze, and also that no other individual were hurt, or none of them were hurt. But when you see those things tangibly, it really resonates and holds a lot of weight. So I just wanted to also convey my appreciation to their efforts in saving the lives of residents and containing that fire so more people weren't hurt or even killed. So thank you all. As Mr. DeLuca mentioned, I'm going to give you a summary of some of the Finance Committee reports, meetings that we've had. We are still working toward a resolution or an end in terms of where we want to go with the budget. Obviously, we're having these conversations now because of the impact of COVID-19. It has been a game changer, to say the least. But let me just provide a brief narrative so that everyone knows where we are to date and where we're trying to go. And you'll have an opportunity to provide a little bit of input in that regard too. So from a property tax collection, the first half of this year is very comparable to 2019. So we're not seeing any real variance in terms of the percentage of revenue that's being collected, which is a great sign. So take into consideration, us extending the grace period, taking partial payments, all those things have still resulted in a situation where year over year, we're almost perfectly aligned in terms of collections. From a revenue perspective, because of everything that's really been shut down due to COVID-19, so rentals, licenses, permits, we're obviously running behind as from our projections, and we're still at a projected shortfall of 1.5 million. That's still where we're looking at. Obviously, this number can fluctuate both ways, but as we open things back up, that's going to be good for us, obviously from a revenue perspective. So we're keeping an eye on that particular lever in the overall budget itself. So knowing that we had this shortfall, we started to work, do the exercise of where can we reduce spend to try to shorten that gap. So if you go from a 1.5 to a 600,000 or whatever the case may be. So with that being said, we were looking at operating expenses and salary and wages. From an operating expense perspective, we found at this point $215,000 in savings. These savings include postage, the fireworks, various special events, dues for meetings, consultants, professional services, jitney fuel, tree plantings, removals, cancellation of recreational programs, expenses associated with that, and so administrative human resources initiatives as well, to name a few. So we've combed through literally every line item about what we're doing and what could be reduced and what has been reduced. And so that's about $215,000 at this point. I want to note that from operating expenses, we originally was $315,000, but due to the fact that we want to be cognizant of potential legal fees associated to litigation, we allocate $100,000 to that line, for that process. From a salary and wages perspective, we found nearly $100,000, $94,000 in reductions. These are by layoffs of crossing guards, which we did in June, and individuals that are working in recreation, and one individual who's working in the police department. So if you look at that 94,000 at 215 cumulatively, that would be $309,000 in savings. That's OE and salary and wages, which is about 88%. of $350,000. And why is that significant? Because $350,000 is a tax point. So we feel that after we do a deeper dive and take a look at some other areas, inclusive of some things we can do in the library, that we can definitely get to that 350 and probably slightly over. So assuming that we can achieve that tax point, really the question now for all of us or for my colleagues is, do we strive to get 2 points? So assuming likely we'll hit that 1 point of tax savings, do we continue the exercise to try to cut another point? I must warn you that that point will have to come from salary and wages. So that would be inclusive of furloughs, potential layoffs, and deferrals of salary increases. So that's something that I want to put out there. So we're here, and we could potentially get here to 2 points, potentially, but it's going to be some serious conversations, and they're going to be focusing more on the salary and wages side of the ledger. Any questions? Okay, well, thank you. Myself, Mr. DeLuca, Mr. Peloge, and Mr. Veros will be continuing to meet. We're meeting at least once a week, if not twice a week, I think at this point. And we'll continue to keep you informed. Again, our goal is to get you that point, and we believe strongly we'll be at that point. And then we'll see where we're at that point, plus the incremental toward 2. And we will assess what we can do beyond that. But at this point, we'll focus on getting that point and then some, and come back to the committee with those hard numbers for our discussion in 2 weeks. The last 2 things that I want to discuss is that I want to let the community know that we are well aware of the desire to hear from our police chief. I've talked with him today. He is working on a statement. This situation with George Floyd has impacted all of us. And it's not just, residents, fellow brothers and sisters, but it also has impacted our police officers as well, those who have pride in wearing their uniform. A lot of them are embarrassed, and ashamed of what this particular individual did and how he has, taken some of the pride away from law enforcement. I can speak freely as my brother's a police officer in Chicago, and he says just a sad state of affairs and unacceptable. So with that being said, our chief is trying to put together a very thoughtful piece. He's been a member of our community for all of his life. He went to Columbia High School and then joined the police force and has come up in the ranks. So he is a Maplewoodian through and through. And this situation, it's gutting at him, and he wants to put his thoughts in paper. And so for those who are looking for that statement, it is coming, but it will be thoughtful, and it will be from his heart, and not anything that's, a blanket response, which I think sometimes can happen when things are rushed. And finally, I just want to talk about George Floyd in the forum. What I'm looking to do with my colleagues is have a forum on Juneteenth. That will be June 19th for those who don't know what that date is. And I'm looking to collaborate with the Community Board of Police. As Mr. Limbrick and Mr. Daffis have already communicated, they're having a meeting tomorrow, and I know that they'll be discussing the forum. And we're going to do a deep dive into the process of law enforcement and interactions with people of color, particularly Black males, and when situations go awry and there is police brutality and other issues. And we want to reveal and find out where those pain points are, those pressure points are of injustice. And then we want to put action items together to address them. So as Mr. Limbrick said, If we have an issue at the prosecutor's office, then we want to go there. We want to get a deeper understanding and see what we can do to get new prosecutors in the office. We also are going to talk about economic racism and stigmas. These things have led to cultural and institutional racism. And it's time for us to really talk about that. And these institutional and racism and stigmas, they bleed into our school district, into our school systems. And yes, we have a great community, but we have a lot of work to do. All that glitter is not gold, as I like to say. There is stigmas, there are stereotypes, there are economic discrepancies in our community. And so it's time for us to talk more about that and the importance of being a true one community. So we're going to have those conversations, and we're going to challenge people to put their effort and energy, where their social media posts are, to really start to open up that dialogue and understand what's happening to our people of color in our own community. So coming out of this forum will be action items, and they will continue. We do not want to have a finite event. We want to continue to push hard, create subcommittees, and report on, and have some action items that we can achieve. And we will keep moving forward in that regard. So more information to come about the forum, which will be Juneteenth and June 19th. I look forward to working with my colleagues, with the Community Board of Police, with other people that have information, knowledge I think will be useful, and we will go from there. Thank you, and that is my report. We'll now move on to our only discussion item, which is backyard above ground swimming pools for the COVID summer. And Mr. Daffis, you will lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I was about to make a motion to adjourn. I thought we were reaching the end. But we do have this one discussion item which should go really quickly. This is not really complicated, but there is some differing, there are some different opinions about how to address it, which I thought I should bring to the rest of the committee as is appropriate. So I provided an email and a little bit of a background about this to you all already. Essentially, considering the circumstances and whether or not we may have a pool season, or if the pool season is going to be one that people feel comfortable taking advantage of under the circumstances this summer, a lot of folks have been reaching out about putting in temporary above ground pools in their backyards. Think inflatable pools, think framed pools. And so they've been reaching out to us to ask us to consider waiving some of our existing zoning permit requirements and some of our other requirements as it relates to backyard setbacks to allow more people to be able to do this. In particular, people are thinking about putting in pools with at least 24 inches in height, whatever that comes to in terms of volume of water, up to 24 inches in height. And so we brought this up in discussion, code enforcement, where it should have started. We had a good discussion there, and we asked our construction official, Len Mendola, to do some research. We asked for his recommendation. We also asked our community development director, Annette DePalma, who works with Mr. Len Mendola, to provide her insight. They are both available for this discussion tonight, I think, unless they're asleep at this point. So I framed it for everyone here. I'd like to hear from them. Len essentially said that he is comfortable allowing these above ground swimming pools at 24 inches in height to be, granted a waiver from any permits, and to allow for any waiver of setback yard requirements. Len can speak a little bit more as to his thought process. Go ahead, Len.
All right, let me clarify that. Swimming pool, the definition in our ordinance right now It's 243-7. It specifically says water having a depth of 18 inches or greater or a volume in excess of 100 cubic feet would be considered a swimming pool. So my suggestion was, because the state code allows the depth of the water to be over 24 inches, that would be considered a swimming pool by definition. So anything 24, if you change the definition to what the state code specifies, anything 24 inches or less of depth of water would not require a permit, which would not have to meet any of the zoning ordinance setbacks or requirements. So that was one alteration we could make, because then we're just going to go by what the state code specifies, which is fine. Because the state pretty much, in that case, the state would supersede what the township code says. And that's the first part of it. Does anybody have any questions in reference to that?
Yeah, I do. Do you have any sense of, so if it's not 24 inches, do you know what the next size up is?
Yeah, looks like they're about 30 inches. 30 inches in height, which would be the water depth. Again, the size of the pool doesn't tell you what the water depth is. Generally, you have to go by the manufacturer's specs.
Okay.
Let me just. I'm sorry, Len. Go ahead.
Sure. No, that's it. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to just clarify or reiterate what Len said before. The state is very persnickety about this dimension, so that the height of the pool structure itself cannot exceed 24 inches. So in other words, in terms of water depth, it probably winds up being a couple of inches fewer than 24. So you can't buy a 30-inch high framed pool or blow-up pool and just say you're gonna fill it up 24 inches. The structure, height of the structure itself cannot exceed that under the Uniform Construction Code.
Right. That is correct.
Right. So thanks, Annette and Len. So what we're saying here is, if we're comfortable with our waiving any permits here locally, and any zoning issues for these pools up to and not higher than 24 inches in height, right?
Depth of water, correct. Yes, it's the same, pretty much the same thing. Yes.
Right. And Len, your recommendation is you're okay with no permit. The other related issue here is your recommendation as it relates to whether or not fencing would be required for these things. And
not for those in particular, because at that point, if you alter the definition, then that becomes, then anything 24 inches or less is not a swimming pool. So what you're now saying is swimming pool, bathing pool, whatever, containing water over 24 inches deep would be a swimming pool in definition. So if anything below anything 24 inches or less is not considered a swimming pool. So there's no law for that. It's not considered anything. So you can pretty much put that up without any requirements.
Right. So
because that's what the state code says.
Right. So to simplify it even more, anything at 24 inches or less would not really be a swimming pool. Technically, that would require any of the permitting, fencing, and other requirements that we traditionally apply to swimming pools, right?
Yeah, 271-61 swimming pool ordinance. That gives you specifications for a swimming pool. This would not apply to that because it's not a swimming pool.
Right. So
per our township ordinance.
Great. Thanks, Len. So let's loop in Annette. Annette, what's your feeling about this?
Well, I support Len's recommendation. The only thing that I would I guess, add to the conversation is that in terms of having a zoning review,
Yes.
I don't think that's such a bad idea to do anyway. Whether you want to maintain the fee or not is, these are obviously both within your guys' policy making decisions. But my only thinking about having a zoning review done, and again, it really, I'm using that process loosely, is we have all these regulations and the state has all the regulations for public safety reasons. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance, people's needs and desires to kind of self-recreate in their own houses because, other things are limited, but we still want to preserve safety, right? And we also don't want to, as when I spoke to Mr. Desiderio about this, he brings up another point, which actually does not apply with Mr. Mendola's recommendation, but that's if you go over 24, then you start implicating other things, and then you got a preemption issue between the local law and the state. So but again, to go back to my only question to the governing body is, does the township want us, as staff people, to make some effort to ensure that the structure that people are recommending for their personal use on their private property does not exceed 24 inches high? If you feel comfortable just saying, it's a temporary measure, people are going to go out and buy these little wading pools, leave it alone, we're fine with that. If you want greater oversight, we're fine with that as well. But I fully support what Len recommended.
And I agree with you doing zoning reviews because people, again, they're not just lying, they're buying pools just about anywhere. And sometimes they don't realize what that is, and they don't know anything over 24 inches is considered a pool. Somebody gets hurt on the property, then they become responsible. I think with the zoning review, it's a great idea because then we'll have record of it, whether, what it is. And personally, whenever they're going to get a pool, I would ask for the manufacturer specs. So the manufacturer specs will tell me exactly what it is. So I think that's I think we really should do that to protect everybody.
So thank you both. So this is Dean again. So what does the zoning review look like? How cumbersome is it? How long does it take? How is that communicated to the public? Where is it on our website, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it's a pretty,
yeah.
Go ahead, Len.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Right, that's very simple. It's actually very simple. It's right on if you go to departments, you click three units over and it's right there. And it's easy to make a copy. People actually, what I've been telling them to do is, again, anything over 18 inches at this point, submit the zoning review with the permit application. Because it's a simple process. Because with the zoning review, I need to see the manufacturer specs, and I also need, if it's over 18 inches at this point, I also need to see the location and impervious lot coverage. So to make the process go quicker, I try to get them to do it all at once. And again, it's not a big deal to do it that way. And all the paperwork is all in the same area that Annette set up on the website, so it's pretty simple to get at. So
you know what, Len? I think I'm going to make like a friendly amendment to what you just said. So, to really kind of make it simple for people, why don't we just have them fill out an application for the zoning review and attach the pool specs just right to that, or
right.
Take a picture of the dimensions from the side of the box or whatever. Let's make it like real easy.
Can I suggest let them work this out? We have a policy decision, and I would recommend we do the zoning review and we waive the $25 fee.
Yes,
okay,
I agree totally.
Good.
Yeah, good
I'll
idea.
second that, Vic.
Yeah.
What about the rest of our colleagues?
I have a question, and and maybe this is a question for Mr. Desiderio, but in doing this, is the township potentially taking on liability here if there ends up being an issue with one of these pools, creating a danger to safety, if there's an accident somehow, is the fact that we're doing these reviews, are we potentially, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I just want to understand, are we potentially taking on liability here, legal liability,
Sure.
that we may not be thinking about?
Looks like we just lost Roger,
We lost Roger.
just at a perfect time, but
Yeah, I don't see it. Okay, well, I mean,
So-
that's my concern. That I would just like to think about. Might we be, in trying to be helpful here and in trying to be safe, might we be sort of putting ourselves in a position where we're responsible then for things on people's property where otherwise we wouldn't be?
Well, I mean, I just, while Roger is getting back on the phone, I mean, I don't think the township would have any additional liability than they would by having a zoning enabling statute that says you can have a pool that's 18 inches as opposed to, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think the liability issue is exactly the same, and I'm not sure if there is any anyway, because somebody's putting it on their private property, but, Roger, where are you?
we're granting them a permit, so.
Well, we're not making this a permitted thing. What we're basically doing is, okay, now you'll get the municipal attorney's answer.
Roger.
Working on getting him back.
Let's see if I can do this. Hold on. Go ahead, Roger.
Guys, I'm sorry, I disconnected myself. The answer to Greg's question is that I'm not concerned about that. With sufficient immunities under Title 59, that's not a concern about the inspection.
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, so
I do
what
have
about,
a question.
Hold on. Roger has a question. I'm sorry.
I have a question. I'm not really sure. I mean, whatever you guys want to do is fine, but you don't require an inspection now for any pool over eight. Actually, you don't require a zoning review for an 18-inch pool. Why are you putting in another layer of zoning review for? All we're doing is changing from 18 inches to 24 inches. I don't know why you want to do that. And if we go back to 18 inches, are you going to have a zoning review for 18 inches?
yeah, Roger, that's a really good question. The only reason I think that we were kind of throwing that around is that we want to make sure that people don't wind up putting in pools that are 4 feet high, without fences, without lids, without setback. It was kind of a,
Whoa. Now you're
What?
talking about setbacks?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying everything
you
in our.
you did talk about setbacks.
Okay,
I
I
mean,
did.
You're going down a whole different path. I thought the idea was that we were kind of in a situation where the pool may not be there, at least for a period of time, and we want to give people a chance to go from 18 inches to 24 inches. And what we were going to talk about was a resolution that was basically going to give some relief, okay, and it was going to be through the end of the year. We're now starting a whole different process, and if that's what the governing body wants, okay, but I'm just not sure that we're going to be able to do that as quickly and as easily as we originally thought.
Okay, hold on, Roger. So I'm withdrawing my recommendation. I just want to move a resolution that we define the swimming pool using the state definition. That's it. And that's what we tell people.
me too. No zoning review, right?
No.
Great. Is everything?
I just, there was something about that made me uncomfortable, putting aside liability. I'm just not sure why we want to go down that road and open up that can of worms. So I would, to the extent there's a motion on the floor from Mr. DeLuca, I second it.
Any further discussion then?
I just wanted to add wonder if we want to consider some additional language to the resolution that pertains to our public health officer's concerns, namely that, there should be a guardian at all times. I don't think that's a problem, adding that language. And that the water should be drained regularly, which is something you want to do if you have a pool anyway.
We don't, Mr. Davis, again, that's a whole separate series of regulations that we don't have in place now. We don't have it in for 18-inch pools.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Roger, because other people were talking in the background. Can you say that again?
Yeah, what you're doing, and I'm not suggesting that it's not the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but we don't require those things now for 18-inch pools. So all I'm saying is, if you want to do that, that's fine. But this is going to take a much longer process to draft all of that, because those are all new regulations.
I see.
What? How about if we just change the definition and we put something on the website that has Ms. Davenport's suggestion for anyone who has a pool, what they should be doing?
That works for me.
Okay.
Agreed. Okay.
I'm okay with that.
So Mayor, we have a motion in a second, right?
Yes. Any further discussion?
No.
Seeing none. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Adams,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. And thank you, Annette, Roger, Lynn, and Dean, and
Roger, you're going to stay on for the rest of the
for
meeting.
diving into that subject.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have Mr. Desiderio captured here with me.
Okay. Yeah.
In the form of a phone, so he'll stay on for the balance of the meeting.
Yeah, we'll try to make it as fast as possible at this point. We are now on agenda item number 15, the consent agenda. May I receive a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move items 1 through 10 on the consent agenda.
Second.
Perfect. Discussion. Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Lembrick,
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Mr. Walt, we're now at our public comment, any subject matter. Mr. Waltz, do we have any people on the phone have any comments?
You have no public comment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. We will now close agenda item number 16, and I will move to agenda item number 17. I'll take a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll see you at 8 a.m.
Aye. Oh, right.
Good night.
We're done.
Thank you.
All right.